There was a certain king by the name of Akbar, and he liked to test his chief advisor, who was a wise man called Birbal. So one day he said to Birbal, "Will you bring to me the very poorest of the poor man who is also noble?" So Birbal went out into the town and brought back with him a beggar and presented him to King Akbar, saying, "This is the lowest of the low, a man who is a beggar in the streets of your capital." But then King Akbar said, "But how then can he be noble?" And Birbal said, "He has been invited to be in the presence of the greatest of emperors. Does this not render him noble?" There was a professor of philosophy, and he went to a certain monastery where the abbess was known for her great wisdom. And he asked of her, "I'm interested in the philosophy of Buddhism. Would you explain this to me?" And the abbess thought for a moment and said, "We don't have a philosophy. What we teach here is awareness. We concentrate on this and this alone." And the professor said, "Surely then you have a philosophy of awareness." But then they decided to go out for a walk in the monastery garden, and it was a very, very hot day. So after a while they were sweating and decided to sit under the corners of a tree. And as they sat there, in answer to the question of the professor, the abbess said, "Awareness. When we're walking in the sun and we become hot and sweaty, we need no philosophy to bring us to sit under the corners of a tree. Nor do we need a philosophy when we put our hand on a hot stove. We know naturally to withdraw our hand. When a child cries, we need no philosophy to give the child sukha." And so it is with awareness. We need no philosophy for this. And with this awareness, we find liberation. All we need to do is attain this. It is enough. And then there's finally that story of Li Tzu. He was a student of the great Lao Tzu. He'd been with Lao Tzu for many, many years. But then, in the town in which they lived, people spoke of a shaman who lived up in the mountains nearby. And they described that when he came into town, everyone was afraid. Everyone was afraid of this seeming, all-knowing and very frightening being. He had black piercing eyes. He wore animal skins with bones around his middle, amulets hanging from his neck. And when he came into town, he would often say to them, "Who wants to know when they're going to die? Let me tell you." So when Li Tzu heard about this shaman, he was curious, very curious. So he asked permission of Lao Tzu to go to visit this shaman. And so he did. He made his way up the mountain, and there was the little tent of this being, with smoke coming out of the opening. But the shaman said, "What are you here for? You want me to tell you when you're going to die? Come in, come in." So he was invited inside the tent, where there was a fire burning around. There were animal skins and hanging all kinds of weird accoutrements to what a shaman does. And so Li Tzu, with some fear, sat down while the shaman started to do his incantations. Sometimes he'd throw some powder on the fire, and blue smoke and red smoke and yellow smoke would fly around the tent. And then the shaman began to make animal sounds, so real, so piercing. Into Li Tzu, he began to tremble. But when the shaman made the distinct sounds of a mountain lion, that was almost too much for Li Tzu, because he'd had a run-in with a mountain lion when he was a child, and he was deathly afraid of mountain lions. So when the shaman made this sound, he took all the control that he had to remain seated and not get up and run away. But after all this was over, Li Tzu went back to Lao Tzu and he said, "Well, I'm very sorry, Master, but I found someone who's greater than you are." "Oh," Lao Tzu said, "well, ask him to come and see me tomorrow." So Li Tzu went up and invited the shaman to come down to meet the master Lao Tzu. But when the shaman came, Li Tzu was kept outside. He wasn't allowed to come in to Lao Tzu's little hut. So he tried to listen to what was going on as he sat outside. But presently the shaman came out, and Li Tzu said, well, how was it? What happened?" Shaman said, "I can't read him. I can't read your master." And off he went up the mountain, back to his hut, his tent. So when Li Tzu went into his master's presence, he said, "Master, what happened? The shaman said he couldn't read you." Oh, said Lao Tzu, "it's merely that I withdrew my attention. So he wasn't able to read me. I was invisible to him. Ask him to come again tomorrow." So Li Tzu went up the mountain again to invite the shaman down into the presence of Lao Tzu again. And again, Li Tzu was left outside while the shaman went inside. When the shaman came out, he said, your master's going to die. He's dying. Can't do anything for him. He's dying." And off he went up the mountain again. Li Tzu was weeping. He went, "Oh, Master, I'm so sorry. I should not have gone into..." Lao Tzu said, "Don't be concerned. I withdrew my attention and my awareness. And when attention and awareness are withdrawn, the life force is contained. The chi is drawn within. And so there's an appearance of dying, withdrawing. Tell him to come again tomorrow." So again, Li Tzu went up the mountain to invite the shaman back again, and he was somewhat reluctant, but he came again, and Li Tzu was left outside, and the shaman went inside. And after a while, when the shaman came out, Li Tzu said, "Oh, well, what happened?" Shaman said, "Oh, he's alive, he's going to live now, you owe me 6 chickens. So, he went up the mountain again, and Li Tzu went in and asked the master, "Well, what happened?" And of course the Master Lao Tzu said, "I allowed my presence, my attention and my awareness to be open to him. So the life force, the chi, was restored. Ask him to come again tomorrow." So again Li Tzu went up, but the shaman was really very reluctant this time. Li Tzu had to really beg him to come down to see the master once again. So he came down, and Li Tzu was left outside, and shaman went inside. After a while, the cabin door opened, and out bolted the shaman, running as fast as he could go. Then Li Tzu tried to chase him. What happened? What happened? But the shaman was going too fast. He was beating it out of town as fast as he could go. So when Li Tzu went in to ask the Master Lao Tzu, "Well, what happened?" And the Master Lao Tzu said, "Well, this time I became the emptiness. I became empty. And in so doing, the void opened, the abyss, aperture was revealed." And the shaman was deathly afraid. That shaman was never seen in town again. As we can glean from these stories and the question that was asked, what are we when we are no longer the pencil with which God writes, the instrument of the divine, so to speak, and when we are no longer the hole in the flute through which God plays? What are we? This is the question that's here for us, with the possibility that in the few days that we're together, we might begin to glean the answer. But in the meantime, we have the chance here to be able to express, to verbalize, even a question. What is it that arises out of this question and these stories for you, where you are right now, right now? What do these stories mean for you? Do you dare answer who you believe you are now? Do you dare?
Well, what I take from it is we're God.
Right, right.
I dared.
You dared. Bravo. Bravo. And where does that statement lead us? I am God. Is that an end or a beginning?
Maybe neither.
Maybe neither. Maybe neither. But in making that statement, we see something has happened to our mind. Isn't it so? But when we have this God, it's inevitably something. Something.